YouTube every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. And this time round, we were just discussing off air what a small world. Brother Omar Zia, it is fair to say he is one of the OGs, the originals. I won't use the other acronym, but one of the originals with the Happy Strong Family team, one of the core founders of this team. He is now a principal at the Credit Woodlands School in Peel Region. Now, do they still call it Credit Woodlands or is it just Woodlands?
It's just the Woodlands School.
Just the Woodlands School. Clearly, I'm dating myself for any of the audience that maybe might recognize me or might not. I've since grown a beard. Clearly, I used to rock a goatee for a long time, but now I'm full on beard. So, Brother Omar Zia, principal and educator. Today's episode is going to be supporting your child's education. You're going to provide all our parents. We kind of do a pendulum. We focus on marriage. We focus on pre-marriage. We focus on teens. We focus on youth, youth in terms of how they could maybe establish a halal relationship. But now we're kind of swinging the other way and going now on children's education. So, Brother Zia, two topics here we really want to cover. Supporting your child's education in terms of a career path. Right. You were discussing also off air as well. You're also a professor at Queen's University. So do tell us that and how that connects, because you provide some post graduate courses for guidance counselors specifically, to what I understood off air. And then also, and I think this is a really important one, you know, just growing up here in Canada, being first generation Canadian, my kids now second generation, how can you meld, how can you mesh, how can you bring together an Islamic value system with a career path, right? You go to the mosque, you go to the masjid. We're physically here within the Masjid Dar al-Iman building, and I know the imam has always said, look, there's nothing wrong with any of your children becoming imams or alims and whatnot, alhamdulillah. But outside of that, that's the obvious career path. So really interested to get your hot take on keeping your deen, keeping your faith, and then establishing a career within that. So, Brother Zia, over to you.
Okay. Sure,
Brother Omar, sorry.
Okay, so my background before becoming an administrator was in guidance. I was a guidance counselor for about 10 years. So a lot of my work with students and with their parents and with the community at large was about supporting parents understanding what are the variety of career pathways that occur after high school is finished.
Okay.
And we have the obvious university, which is oftentimes the main pathway that we promote, regardless of our backgrounds or even our faith group for that matter. Parents want their children to get a university education, followed by college, which is often being deemed as a lower pathway, let's say. But in reality, the way the world is working today, you'll find that most people with a university degree don't find a job within the first 7 years of graduating. They don't find a job in their specific field, I should say.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of them are actually going back to college. In fact, on average, you'll find about 35 to 40% of first-year college entrance people coming into college already have a degree, but they need a very specific skill to get into the field of their choice.
Yeah.
So, and you'll also find that for certain fields, it's harder to get into college programs than to university programs. And a good example of that is nursing. So registered nursing, the average on average, depending on the university, is 86% as an entrance average to get into registered nursing as a university program. But practical nursing, you need a minimum of 85% to be considered now, because of how many people are applying to that program in the college level.
I thought I was the anomaly. I mean, back in the day, as I mentioned off air, I'm a York graduate. But then from York, I did humanities and political science, double major, and I scratched my head and I'm like, what in the world can I do with this degree?
Right.
People don't even know what humanities is. I spent a ton on books, rare books, used books, antique books. But only in my fourth year did I figure out, humanities is the actual study of the human condition through literature. Okay, well, a very fancy way of kind of just mentioning that topic. But that being said, then I did a postgraduate program at Centennial for journalism.
Right.
And that's how I kind of got my career start into the magazine world. But that's another podcast session unto itself.
For sure. But that's a good example of having the university background and going to college to get a very specific skill that can actually make you a contributing member within our society, right? So it's something for our parent community to become more aware of, is that there's more than one pathway. University is not the end-all be-all of pathways. And often another pathway that's often overlooked is the military pathway, right?
Oh,
within Ontario, we have the Royal Military College. A number of programs are subsidized by the federal government for for our students to enter in, complete a program, work within the military and an
Mhm.
actual job, and either continue or move on to other jobs in the private or public sector.
I'm really glad you bring that up. My nephew actually
Mhm.
brought that up, and he said, Uncle, I'm thinking about getting into the enlist into the military,
Right.
army, and or the what do they call it, the reserves,
Yeah.
within the Canadian Armed Forces. But he told me, well, how can I practice my dean, right? And
Mhm.
then I actually looked into it. A former colleague of mine is now, or I think at one point was a recruiting officer for the Canadian Armed Forces, and you can get what's called an accommodation letter. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, there are several accommodations available in any
Mm.
workplace and within any post-secondary institution, as well as the military itself. Without getting into too many details, but there are a number of Muslims actually in the Canadian Armed Forces
Good to
who
know.
do make use of those accommodations to determine where to hold on to their deen, to be able to support their country, but in a way that meshes with their identifications. And there are a number of accommodations for people of a wide variety of identifications,
Mhm.
not just faith-based. Right?
Okay.
Even cultural values may come into play as
All
well.
right. All right.
Their forms of identity can be accommodated as well. Something to keep in mind, though, is when I speak about the military pathway, I'm not necessarily speaking about going to become an infantry soldier,
Mhm.
but to actually look into becoming an engineer or a marine biologist, a marine engineer through the military, because they have very specific programs available.
Oh.
So you can complete your whole engineering degree. You can complete your medical college through the RMC as well.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So people
I
are not aware
had
of that.
no
And it's
idea.
all subsidized. And considering that in the last 15 years now, the the provincial government has reduced the amount of subsidy it provides for certain post-secondary programs.
Mhm.
It's a viable solution for people not able to get loans, trying to avoid loans and OSAP, and
Mhm.
want a subsidy from the government. So
Mhm.
that's a viable pathway. A fourth pathway, which is also overlooked, are the trades.
Okay.
Right, we're now living in a time where it's more difficult to find people with a trade. And there are a number of trades available in the automotive industry, within the computer science industry,
Mhm.
electrician. Anybody who's ever hired an electrician knows how much they cost.
Yeah.
Right. Anybody needed to get their HVAC system, heating, ventilation, air conditioning replaced or repaired. I mean, to get a new heater or air conditioner for your home, you're looking at from $10,000 to $20,000.
Easy.
And not all of that is the actual equipment. A lot of that just goes for labor.
Labor.
So there's a lot of money to be made there. And
Mhm.
especially, I'll give you an example. We had one time brought over during one of our career fairs at school a plumber. And the
Mhm.
plumber completed his trade, but then went to college, George Brown College, and actually got a diploma in entrepreneurial studies. Started his own business
Okay.
and was making more than the doctor and the lawyer combined, who are on the same stage.
Well, there you go.
Yes. So it shows that the trades is another viable option for our parents to consider.
Wow.
When
This
help
has
us-
been quite the eye opener.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll speak for myself,
Mhm.
and I welcome. This is a live show, so please ask the questions. Obviously subscribe, like, and all of that, but ask the questions, because you have Brother Omar here, who is will do a deep dive in this session. But I think it's just been such an eye opener, and I'm now maybe speaking for the audience,
Right.
because culturally speaking, and this
Mhm.
is where we kind of like to differentiate between the deen, the faith, the practices of the faith, and the culture. But I think culturally speaking, it's always like, I'm gonna kind of put on my brown parent accent now. Beta, you have to become doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? Just if you're
Right.
anywhere from the Indo-Pac subcontinent, or or even if you're from a Greek background, Italian background, whatever.
Mhm.
For the longest time, the default for any parent was, son, daughter, you have to become one of these three things: doctor, lawyer, engineer, and that specific order. If you couldn't become a doctor, fine, you're an engineer. If you can't even become that, then for goodness sakes, become a lawyer, for God's sakes, to do something, to have that quote
Mhm.
unquote status
Right.
within the community, right? How can we kind of dismantle these cultural norms
Right.
to say it's not this is not the norm? Let's
Mhm.
deconstruct this, please,
Sure.
because you have such this wealth of knowledge, wealth of experience
Mhm.
within this type of arena. I really want the audience to kind of tap into this now.
Yeah.
Other than going the route of the trades, colleges, through the Canadian Armed Forces, in that you can become a marine biologist, you can become an engineer, you can even become a doctor, as you said.
Right.
What other career options are there for first, second generation Canadians now, Muslim
Mhm.
Canadians?
It's a good question. I'll just share a quick anecdote that my mother, for the longest time, was after me to go complete my PhD, just so she can call me a doctor. Right?
Yeah.
So I can see that definitely is something very important. And even myself as an educator, as a principal, when I looked at my own children, my own two children, I do want the best for them. I want them to succeed.
100%.
And oftentimes in society, we look at these doctoral or engineer as the top professions. Because as you mentioned, it provides status, it provides financial stability,
Mm-hmm.
it provides some sense of stability within society as well. When I speak with parents and when I speak to myself as well, the question to ask is that we're right now sitting here in this studio.
Mm-hmm.
Who built this building? Who built the computer technology that we're using right now? Who built the cell phones that we're using?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It wasn't a doctor. It wasn't a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe engineering was involved, but there are a lot more people than just a typical engineer doing drafting or coming up with some architectural drawings. All the lighting that we have over here, the homes that we live in, the cars that we drive.
Mm-hmm.
When we have to get our car repaired, we don't go to a doctor, lawyer, or engineer.
Yeah.
We live in a society. And within the society, we have a number of professions that are available. A very basic premise to all education is actually based on the Montessori philosophy: follow the child. It is important for us as parents to follow our children, to provide for them a wide variety of opportunities to look at where they might fit in the world.
Okay.
Because not every kid wants to be a doctor. Not every kid wants to become a dentist.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one wants to become a pharmacist.
Okay.
Maybe they want to become a teacher.
Yeah.
I joke with my parents all the time that I come from a family of teachers, but my parents kind of hushed that down and said, no, you come from a family of doctors and accountants, right? But we want our children to explore as many career opportunities as possible. In the secondary system, we have a great course called Grade 10 Career Studies.
Okay.
And the purpose behind that course is so that students do look at a wide variety of pathways and career options within those pathways as well. I encourage all of our parents to become more aware of what pathways exist, explore within our families, what kind of professions are within our families. Maybe we have someone in our extended family who is a mechanic, who is a dentist, who is an accountant, who works overseas somewhere, or who is a teacher, or is working in marine biology, or working in some other, there are so many jobs, it's impossible to list them all.
Right.
But to expose our kids to all these, a wonderful variety of professions, and let them choose
Mm-hmm.
what's best for them. And we are living in a time right now, and it sounds kind of funny to say this, but we are living in a time where new professions are being invented regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout, every year there's a new type of profession that comes out and a new
100%.
opportunity. The world is changing so rapidly. We look at at AI and that's not just artificial intelligence. It's not just within computer science, but it's finding a way in all sorts of fields. Biotechnology is the most rapid growing field right now globally, right? You don't want to be a doctor, fine, but maybe you want to be the kind of person who designs the tools that doctors use in surgeries.
Hear that, parents? So I think, I mean, this is a great point. And let's kind of flip the conversation here.
Sure.
Rather than speaking to the parents, and by all means, please look in directly into your camera when you're speaking to now the youth. Okay, because for me, it's been a long-standing focus of mine that whenever my nieces or nephews ask, I just take all my experience, my wisdom, whatever I have, and I say, look, if you're willing to give me 5 minutes of your time, this is what you could potentially do. Why? Because more often than not, the feedback I'm getting, Brother Omar, believe it or not, is, oh, uncle, I want to set up an Airbnb. Okay. Is that like a career path? I don't know. What are you going to be doing after you've set up this Airbnb? You come and fluff the sheets and, you fix the pillowcases and you restock the water bottles. Is that like a long-standing career? Think about it. Oh, uncle, I want to become a YouTube creator. Hey, Ryan's Toy Shack or whatever that great teen star, I guess you could now fairly say. Fine, it made all the news a few years back that he raked in $24 million through doing all these reviews and whatnot. That ain't for everybody, okay? Tell you point blank. Or, hey, I'm going to mine Bitcoin. Believe it or not, those are the top 3 responses I get from the youth. Mm-hmm. So it kind of almost bothers me that it's a little bit of a narrow vision. And I think the youth themselves just are swayed so much by the power of the media. One, YouTube Shorts, which is just, I've said this before, I'll say it again, it's rotting people's brains because you're just going into automatic ADHD mode, 5-second clip, swipe up, 5-second clip, 5-second clip. So let's put a serious lens on this. For the youth, again, keeping in the context of a potential, surrounding themselves within the faith, what can they do? How can they educate themselves? Is it going to career fairs? Is it reaching out to guidance counselors? Like, what are their avenues to kind of educate themselves, find out?
For sure. I want to mention that entrepreneurial studies and entrepreneurial pathways are a viable pathway. Even YouTube, as funny as it might sound, can be a viable pathway for people. Opening your own Airbnb or getting involved with a bunch of people and renting out some homes for vacation properties, or even getting together. And I saw this at UOIT, which is not too far from here, when a group of students came together, put the money down, bought 3 homes, and rented out to other students. Entrepreneurial pathways is something which is viable. I mean, the whole area of business is something we don't often talk about as a pathway, but investments, not just accounting, but investments, getting involved, even in Bitcoin for that matter, learning how those markets work in cryptocurrency. It's a growing field. There are places for students, and for for families to become aware of and involved in. But it is so important, first and foremost, to our students here, is that the main message I'd like to provide to our audience is, no matter what you choose to do in your life, as Muslims, we have been taught to do everything with ihsan, to do everything through excellence and with excellence. So even if you want to become a police officer, go right ahead. But your aim should be become a sergeant, become a detective, become the lieutenant, become a captain, become the chief of police. Even if you want to become a doctor, great. But aim to be that, the next Dr. Tam or Dr. Lo, like, be the chief medical expert in your region, right? Be the chief of the hospital that you're working in. If you want to get involved in accounting or business, great. Open your own firm. You want to become a lawyer, open your own firm. Put your name as a partner and the leading partner in that firm. If you want to become an HVAC specialist, great. Learn how to become an entrepreneur and open your own business and hire others, right? So do everything you want to do with ihsan. If you want to go into teaching, great. Go into the profession of teaching with the idea that you want to become a vice principal, a principal, maybe the director of the board. Always aim for the highest position possible, because the higher up you are, the greater influence you will have on all those who are involved in that profession, or all those involved in that building. What does that mean? I'll give the example of a teacher. As a teacher in the classroom, when I want to support Muslim communities or student communities in the school, I'm very limited in what I can do. I can support kids in my classroom. Maybe I can get involved in sports and extracurricular activities and coaching, but I'm still limited in my scope. When I become the vice principal or principal, I can now influence an entire building. If I become a superintendent, I can now influence a number of buildings. As a director of the board, I can influence the entire board. So I encourage all of us to consider that whenever we enter whatever we were entering, put ourselves into a position where we can influence in a positive, permanent way society, right? So again, if you want to become a police officer, you want to become a firefighter, you want to become a nurse, you want to become a pharmacist, use those positions to support all human beings, to support Muslims and other communities as well, so they can feel a positive impact on who they are and how they can continue to contribute towards society. I'm sure not, the both of us being where we are today is because we were supported by other Muslims who use their position, not just our parents, but other people that you and I came across in our lives that have helped us, become proud of who we are as Muslims.
Most definitely.
Right?
Most definitely.
Proud of who we are as citizens of this great country,
Mhm.
and wanting to make the world a better place.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, I think it has to be said, and this saying is not a catchphrase, but it holds such gravitas, such weight, that representation matters. Representation 100% matters, in that, as Brother Omar is saying, if you are a Muslimah, if you're a Muslim, be at the top of your game. And I think this is something repeatedly, if you simply look at the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we know, and as a believer, as a practicing member of the faith, we know he was the best example sent to all of humanity, as you so rightfully said. Be that humanitarian, be at the top of your game, so you can be that example of excellence, to everyone out there, that, oh wow, this guy's rocking it, this girl's rocking it, they're a Muslimah, they're a Muslim, and yes, by the way, they are chief of staff, they are the head of the police department, they're a forensic scientist. Let's get out there and make sure we are representing the community at large, not just locked into these three almost now default standards that have been set culturally by parents. Because again, when our parents came to this country, they were like, hey, you know what? I want the best for my children. So what's the best thing going right now? Okay, either doctor, engineer, lawyer. But that's gone all to the wayside now. We are Canadians, first generation or second generation.
Right.
And so now we have to look at a different kind of mode and say, what can we do to be, to represent society? What can we do to make an impact in society? I'll give you a case in point. We at Masjid Ar-Rahman were very active with our first responders. So we held a dinner, an iftar dinner during Ramadan, and we invited the chief of police, the chief of the fire department, some of the first responders, some local MPs and MPPs. And the chief of police is like, you know what? We need more Muslimas, hijab wearing Muslimas on our police force. Again, why? Because representation matters. So I tell any parent, Muslim parent, willing to listen and say, look, you have a young, Muslima in your family. They can be recruited by the police force, if they make the cut. Obviously, it's making the cut. But again, wearing that hijab, going out there, being on the front lines, should there be an issue with another Muslim family and you see a Muslim officer at the door, that just makes things easier, doesn't it?
It does. It also sets the tone and changes the culture of those institutions. Imagine a day, inshallah, one day, a hijab wearing Muslimah being chief of police here in this region.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine the impact it would have on that entire force?
Right.
It sets the tone. Respect for all cultures, anti-racism approach, because we bring with us our values, which are human-based values, not just for only Muslims, but for everybody, right? So it changes the tone. A Muslim becomes, someone who's wearing a beard or wearing a hijab and is a practicing Muslim and the leader of Bell Communications, for that matter, right? And all of a sudden it changes the tone in the entire industry, the entire institution, right? There are so many places where we can have that influence. And just to bring this up, because we think about COVID for the last couple of years and the impact COVID has had on our families, and the impact talking about mental health and well-being has really gone down a lot for all people in general. But I specifically see this amongst Muslims, as an administrator, but also as a guidance counselor as well for so many years, where the question sometimes comes up: where are the Muslim social workers? Where are the Muslim psychologists?
Yeah.
And there are so few of them that they're overworked and they're overbooked. We need more people in this field, because again, when we need help, it would be great to be able to reach out to somebody who understands our values, understands where we're coming from, understands our faith-based identity, and can support us appropriately.
Absolutely. And it makes it relatable. Right?
Yeah,
it makes it relatable, and relatable in the sense that, you get me, so it just makes it that icebreaker, doesn't it, Brother Omar?
Yes.
It's not, I'm not saying that, we're a closed tribe or anything of that nature. No, it just makes it more easy for me as someone in need, and no one needs to suffer in silence. But for me to kind of say, hey, do you get where I'm coming from? Because at the end of the day, when you're seeking help, that's all you really want. You want someone who's that active listener and someone who can relate.
Yeah.
But if you're maybe not part of the faith, then I will have that hesitation. I will have that hesitancy. I mean, we're not saying don't go, but what we're saying is it just makes it all the easier. So again, coming back full circle, representation matters.
Yes.
Right.
I wonder if we can use that as a segue to the second part of the topic, or second
100%.
topic about, encouraging our kids to pursue education that aligns with Islamic values. Representation matters, absolutely. But with that representation comes a responsibility. It is so important that, if I identify as Muslim and I want to go represent, become part of the representation of Muslim in the field of psychology, for that matter,
Okay.
I want to make sure that I'm bringing with myself the Islamic values, the Islamic perspective into everybody that I come across. And if I'm going to speak to the kids for a second, one of the fundamental elements that guides the Muslim in their identity as a Muslim, and I encourage parents to consider all of this as well, in terms of how the conversations that happen in the home, how we frame conversations in our families. Sadaqah, the concept of giving to others and helping others succeed, and being the best that we can for others to succeed, and helping them become the best that they can. The concept of sadaqah is to give, knowing that when we give, society itself will also rise up. Society itself will benefit from each individual person giving. And I'm not talking about monetary giving. I'm talking about giving through our heart, giving through our spirit, giving and making society a better place. I'm not talking about zakat. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about giving our time, volunteering. So, for example, even an example where I've seen a food bank set up on the first Saturday of every month at a masjid, where doctors will come and volunteer their time to support people who don't have a health card. Right? They're brand new to the country. They have not gotten their PR status yet. They're there to help refugees. I've seen teachers volunteer their time after hours at the local masjid to help students struggling in their subjects because the families can't afford to send their child to a tutor, because tutors can be 25, 35 bucks an hour. Right? So there are places for us to volunteer our time to give back to society and to bring that value of wanting to give in everybody that we service, whether I'm a air conditioning expert, whether I'm a teacher, whether I'm an accountant, whether I'm financial expert, right? Whatever I'm doing so that humanity can benefit, right? And this has to be a core value
Right.
that we teach our kids, that when they become whatever they're going to become in the future, it's not just about I'm a Muslim doctor, or I'm a Muslim accountant, or a Muslim police officer, or a Muslim firefighter. It's not just that identity, but it's the responsibility that comes with showing that I'm the best at what I do.
Yes.
I bring ihsan to the equation.
Yes.
I am the best at treating others with the best in the best way, speaking the best words. I don't swear. I don't get involved in alcohol and drugs and that type of lifestyle. But I show the cleanliness and the purity and the peace that is derived from Islam because of the purity, that the tasqiyah that we bring with ourselves, right? In purifying our souls and purifying our interaction with society.
Would it be fair to say, Brother Omar, it's really about character? Right, there are so many examples of the Prophet, of Khadija radiallahu anha, of the Sahaba, that even as an example, Umar radiallahu anhu, right, the lion of Islam. You would think there's this huge man, this very energetic, charismatic man who, yes, had a little bit of a temper, but at the same time, he was one of the leaders of Islam. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself said that if this is the big conditional if there were to be someone after me, it would definitely have been Umar. So you can just well imagine how close he was to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that people, when he was with other Sahaba, they couldn't pick him out from the crowd, right? He was just this humble, down-to-earth figure who just had this fikr, this concern about Islam, about the people within his care, about people within the ummah, like, oh my God, what is and what's gonna happen with the other Muslims under my care, other Muslims under my care. So to your point, it's really about character, right? Having that character, conveying that character, carrying that character with you to say, oh, yes, I recognize your values as a Muslim. So you're right, it's not just identity. It's about character as well. Now, let's use this as a segue. We do have 3 questions from the audience. Producer Kashif, could you please let us know what those questions are for Brother Omar?
Yeah, absolutely. Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair. So this question is actually, I was talking to someone before the stream that's not able to join, but they'll watch later. So and you touched upon it about mental health of students. So when it comes to supporting our children, obviously we need to support their mental health. So when it comes to bullying in schools, right, and you suspect that your child might be going through something or they've told you something, how do you, what's the process to deal with that from both sides? One, with the school, with the system, and also maybe with your child, you're noticing changes, you're noticing concern, but maybe they're not comfortable, maybe they're afraid, maybe they just don't want to speak out about it. So what's from both ends of the coin there? What's the process to best deal with that type of a situation?
Great question. Thank you. So I think when it comes to bullying, first and foremost, it's important for us to have a home and have the atmosphere in the home where where our kids feel comfortable to speak without being judged by their own parents. Right. So we have to be very careful that we do not create an environment where our kid is going through bullying and we're like, how dare you? What's wrong with you? Why don't you fight back? We have to be able to be open and caring and empathetic in our approach to our kids so they can share with us what's actually happening. We as parents have to make sure we don't jump to conclusions, but we should take them, do some fact finding, find out what's happening, get names, how long it's been going on for, who else was present, and which classroom was it happening in, or was it happening in the hallway, or by the lockers, or outside the parking lot, or on the way home, or on the street. Where is it actually occurring? And then use the means that we have. So start with the school. Start with the classroom teacher. You can go to the guidance counselor. But when it comes to areas of discipline, it's the vice principals who are the best people to approach. They can go through the counselor as well. It also depends on the relationships you already have with the school. If your child is already connected with their guidance counselor or the behavior support teacher or their classroom teacher, they can approach those people first and foremost. Your child might want to explore their own independence by taking the first step on their own. And if it doesn't work out, then involving parents. So allow your child some freedom to develop that skill of independence to be able to advocate for themselves on their own behalf when they're experiencing difficulties in life. But begin with the school, again, classroom teacher, behavior support teacher, guidance counselor, then the vice principal, and eventually the principal. Now, the Ministry of Education does have a number of policies surrounding bullying. So you will receive support through the school community. There's no question about it, because that is the responsibility of every administrator. Speaking as an administrator, we are held to account to the Ministry of Education and to our boards of education. All boards of education do have an anti-bullying policy that's steeped within our code of conduct, within the Ministry of Education's code of conduct. So there are a number of supports available to ensure the bullying stops. That's stage one. But as was rightfully mentioned in the question, stage number two is so important, that we have to ensure that we support our kids in the home environment.
Right.
Trauma is very real.
Yes.
Right. And as our kids are going through so much physical turmoil with the adolescence and so on, there's also the growth in the mind as well. Right. And so understanding themselves and who they're going to be, we need to be able to be there to support them, and not necessarily share stories of when I was bullied as a parent, but maybe about the fact that bullying is real. It happens at school, it happens in the community, it happens in the workplace. Islamophobia is a great example of that. Racism in general are examples of that. We see that even through the actions of politicians. We saw that here in Canada through Stephen Harper's government. We see that with Donald Trump in the US. We see elements of that even the Trudeau government, for that matter, as well. So it's important for kids to see that bullying does happen in the world. But how we react to it, how we become stronger, and how we build resiliency within ourselves in those moments of difficulty is so important. So as parents, there are a number of books you can look up, how to build resiliency in your teen. There might be some parenting workshops that are going on, even through Happy Strong Family, on how to build that resiliency within our families, within our children. But you can also, again, ask the school for support.
Right.
Schools all have a social worker and a psychologist attached to them.
Good to know. Okay.
And so, and it's a free service, it's a confidential service. You can make the request through the administrators and through the guidance counselors to access that service. If you want to go privately into the community, Nasiha is a organization that supports Muslims with mental health issues or mental health concerns. The Khalil Center, located in Scarborough, Ontario, and they have one in Philadelphia. Right. These are also available online. And there are a multitude now of different psychological services being provided to our Muslim families. So you can definitely make use of private services too.
Good to know.
But those are also very important, and keep the conversations ongoing. Right. It can't just be a one-time thing. We have to be able to speak to our kids regularly about these topics. Don't wait for something to go wrong.
Right.
So, as an advice to our parents and to our families, and even to our kids for that matter, have conversations at the dinner table where you're speaking about hypotheticals. What if this happens? What if that happens? I heard about such and such happening at this school, or such and such happening at that school. When I was growing up, this happened in my school, right? How can we, overcome that? What would you do if you were in that situation? How could I support you better as your parent if you were in that situation, right? So it's important to keep those conversations going and to ensure that, our kids feel that their parents get it. Their parents understand that life isn't easy as a teenager, right? Or as a kid for that matter. And although I'm talking about high school and teenage years, these follow our kids, all the way through post-secondary into their university, college. It also follows them in the workplace, even after they graduate. I have actually received calls from former students who enter the workplace and then experience bullying and didn't know how to get out of it. What do you do in the workplace? The concept that there's a human resources department, their responsibility is to ensure there's no bullying in the workplace. There's no harassment.
Okay, good to know.
Right?
Good to know.
Even again, as an administrator, working with some teachers who do experience harassment in our schools, there is a process to follow. Right. So it's important for us to be aware of that and to share that kind of information with our.
So, Brother Omar, just real quick, and a question from me as maybe a part two, because I see this as a logical part two. What about cyberbullying? Right. A lot of our teens are undoubtedly on social media, whether it's Instagram, Snapchat, you name it, Discord servers. Like, what about cyberbullying?
Sure.
Can they reach out to the schools for that as well? Is that also within the remit?
Absolutely. Within the code of conduct within the Ministry of Education, how they have provided it, is that when we talk about injurious conduct, it's also to the moral tone of the whole school community. So yes, definitely, if cyberbullying is occurring, you can bring it to the attention of the school. The school will investigate and then provide support as best as they can. Sometimes, though, the school may actually recommend to parents to call the police. The police do have a cyberbullying department that takes care of these type of things that do happen quite often, quite regularly, and it's better for parents to jump on it faster, more quickly, rather than later before something becomes much larger or becomes bigger.
Absolutely.
One of the things we have found through social media bullying or cyberbullying is that it's not just a one-on-one; it's groups of kids who are bullying each other.
Okay.
And it is so important that if we need to get the police involved, we get them involved as quickly as possible before something happens out in the street or at the school. When it comes to cyberbullying, another element that is really creeping up a lot, I think, because of the awareness or the awokeness of society, is racism. A lot of Islamophobia doesn't happen face to face. A lot of anti-Black racism doesn't happen face to face. It happens online, and this is where schools do take a role to ensure that racism is not permeating within their halls, within their classrooms, within the conversations of kids around the school.
Right.
So this is why schools want to become involved in these type of situations too, to ensure that the tone in the school is maintained as a very civil tone and an anti-racism tone as well.
Good to know. Phenomenal. Producer Kashif, second question, please.
Yeah, absolutely. This one I'll ask myself. I always take the opportunity, get a bit selfish, and ask a question. So the title we set for this one sort of was supporting your child, right? And I'm speaking first to myself as a parent. I think with this new generation of parents, the line between supporting and doing is becoming very blurred. And I say that myself, like I'll sit down, support my 4-year-old, but then all of a sudden I'm doing it for them. I lose patience. You know, on Instagram, I'll see someone posting my grade 1 child science fair project. I'm like, there's no way a grade 1 did that one. So I'm just wondering, like, as a parent, like, what are some tips where I don't get that urge to just do, and like, how do I know I've sort of crossed over and now I'm doing instead of supporting?
Thank you for bringing this up. This is an important point, and I'll just share a quick anecdote. I was at a school one time, and this is actually as a teacher.
Okay.
And it was a grade 11 English class, and I gotten an essay, and I knew right away this is not the student's work, and I actually found some plagiarism within the work itself.
Oh goodness.
So I actually didn't grade it, and I just said, plagiarized, and I gave some feedback. The parent called me up and started to argue with me about the feedback I'd given. And about halfway through the conversation, he says to me, "Do you know how long I worked on that essay?"
Oh goodness! Wow.
So it came out in the conversation, right? So this is something which is commonplace, and as Brother Kosh was mentioning, especially when the kids are younger, sometimes we feel that sense of frustration trying to help them, and why can't you get that 1 + 1 = 2? Let me just do it for you, and this becomes, it's not just in schoolwork, but sometimes we're teaching our kids how to wash the car, and we get frustrated, and I'll just wash it for them. We're teaching our kids how to do the dishes, and we'll do dishes for them, or vacuuming or cleaning the room. I'll clean the room for them. So there are two reasons this comes up, why this actually occurs. One is what you probably have heard before: helicopter parenting, or snowplow parenting,
right?
Where, as an administrator, we have this happening regularly, where parents are walking in without talking to the teacher, and they're upset that their child didn't receive the mark that they thought they should receive because their child worked all night on a certain project. And parents themselves are so busy. They're so busy. They're sometimes working more than one job, where their job is just consuming so much of their time that they're not in a position to dedicate more time to their child's success. So as a result of that, they feel guilty. So they start doing work for their child, or they feel they can just walk into a school and yell and scream at the administrators until the child gets 100%, just because the parent is yelling and screaming, because they're not necessarily directly engaged with their child.
Right.
So this is something that's one area where parents need to take a step back and say, well, rather than helicopter parenting, let's become a more engaged parent, right? Actually sit beside your child rather than sitting in front of the TV. Put your phone away when having conversations with your child. Watch them do the work. Help them do the work without doing the work for them.
Right.
Learn how to be a coach, because as a coach of cricket, many years now, I can't go on the field and play. I have to coach the kids to be able to do it on their own when I'm not on the field with them. Right. So we, as parents, we have to become more of a coach mindset rather than being that parent, that overbearing parent that does everything for them. Number two, a strategy I can share, I call it sitting on the hands.
Okay.
And so literally, as a teacher in the classroom, I would sit on my hands and ask a question, and I would wait. And the reason I would wait is because oftentimes, we sit there and we ask a question, and as teachers, we're guilty of this, that no one's answering. After 10 seconds, we just state the answer because no one seems to be participating. But if you wait long enough, somebody will participate.
Okay.
So when it comes to working with our children at home, it's the same thing. Sit on your hands, right? They are washing the dishes. They're not going to get right the first time. You can coach them from the side, but not be overbearing. Don't be that backseat driver when they're learning how to wash the dishes for the first time, or do their laundry for the first time, or learning how to do the quadratic equation for the first time, or Pythagoras' theorem, or Snell's law, whatever they're learning in school, right?
Right.
Math and science references. But you sit on your hands and let them figure things out on their own. And then when they need help, let them ask for the help when they're not getting it.
Okay.
Ask questions, don't tell. Right? Don't say, this is how you do the question. Say, what if you did this next? What should be the next step? What's the model are you using? For example, in doing problem solving in math, using the guess model, given, unknown, the equation, the solution, and the statement, right? I'm teaching people here now, but the idea
no, it's good.
We're
learning. We're all learning.
Yeah. The idea is to sit on our hands and let kids do the work. Right? We have a small saying we say as teachers is that if I'm doing all the work, I'm doing all the learning.
Yes.
Right. So even as a teacher in the classroom, it's no longer about regurgitating everything from the textbook and the kids memorize everything and then just regurgitate it on a test. That's a really outdated style of teaching.
Right.
We bring problems to the classroom and we ask kids to use the skills that we have provided to solve those problems. Right. So even as a parent in the home, there's the dirty dishes are dirty. You have no more clothes left in your closet. What's the solution? How are we going to work on that? And how are you going to do the laundry? How are you going to do the dishes? How are you going to sit down and vacuum the house? How are you going to clean your room? Where are you going to start first? And then model for them. Right? Go into our own rooms. Maybe I've got a dirty closet. I'm not, as a parent, maybe I have my garments all over the place, hanging on the exercise bike because we never use exercise bike as then a third closet, right? So showing them, here's how I hang my shirts, here how I organize my closet, here's how things are organized in my room, and here's how often I do it so I don't end up with the jungle kind of room. And then we teach that to our kids as well. So it's really about coaching and teaching rather than doing.
Okay.
So I hope that answers your question, Brother Kashif.
Then, Brother Kashif, the third question, please.
Yeah, so we got one from the stream. So I think after this question, we'll have to wrap it up. We're approaching our sort of upper limit here. But please suggest also how our children learn about Islam while they are becoming what they want to do.
Okay, good question. So I think when we think about it, there's two elements here, Islam and Muslim. Okay, as you mentioned earlier, character, the values that we have in the home. The question we might want to ask ourselves as parents in the home is, what are the values in our home? What's the culture in our home? If someone were to walk into our house right now, what kinds of conversations would they hear happening? What kind of language would be used? Is it rough language? Is it swearing kind of language? Even in different languages, they're still swearing, right? How would it sound when I address my children? How would it address when the spouses address each other? How would it sound when siblings address each other as well? This is the Muslim part of being in a family. This is the Muslim part of how we conduct ourselves outside the home as well. When I was at Sears a long time ago, when Sears used to exist here in the country, we had a little motto. Is basically, treat your customers like gold and treat each other as colleagues like platinum. Right. Okay. So you treat your customers. So when bring that to the model of a family, when we go into the world, we speak with the sales representatives with such respect. We speak with people at the grocery store with such respect. We speak with friends outside the home with such respect. In our own home, how are we respecting each other?
Right.
We need to treat each other like platinum. So if I'm speaking such sweet words to people outside in the community, my friends, the people at the clerk at the store, my grandparents who I visit once in a while, and how am I now speaking in the home? Am I speaking the same? Or am I speaking worse? Am I speaking better? Right? So we need to treat each other like platinum in the home. So how we conduct ourselves and how we build the culture in the home builds that character that we need our kids to hold on to their Muslim identity.
Right.
There are so many kids who come to school and pray, but they're those same kids who are involved in drinking, drugs, and bullying, and stealing, and cheating. And I'm going to say, I'm at the Woodlands. A quarter of the students there are Muslim. 27% of the students there are Muslim. We just did a survey earlier this year.
Wow. Okay.
And it's embarrassing to say that 90%, I'm not joking, 90% of the problems we face this year from Muslim identifying students. because the core value, the core character of what it means to be a Muslim, of when we say Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, as you mentioned, Muhammad Sallallahu is bil khuluq al azim, from amongst the best of creation. How are we teaching our kids though that mentality, that framework within our homes?
The tarbiyah.
Exactly.
The tarbiyah, the
So
upbringing.
that's the real thing that matters, because whether a person prays or fasts or gives in zakah is almost irrelevant if they themselves don't have the character of what it means to be a Muslim, the character that we derive from the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Islamic values, those are things that happen in the home. So if, as a parent, if I'm not praying 5 times a day, then I can't expect my kids to pray 5 times a day.
Right.
If I'm praying on my own in the bedroom, then there's no accountability for my kids to be praying. But as a family, if we establish every day we're praying Salat al-Maghrib together, every day we're praying Salat al-Isha together, then it becomes part of the norm, part of the culture of that home.
Right.
So that even when people come over to visit, and it's Maghrib time, there's no question, everybody stands up and prays Maghrib together.
Or you go to the mosque.
Or you go to the mosque, whatever the culture is in the home. Right. When it comes to reading Quran, right, we all read Quran together at Fajr time or whatever time it is, maybe once a week, rather than just going to classes and sending our kids to the Islamic class or the Quran reading class at the masjid, we read Quran together in the home. Yeah. Maybe the family sits together and recites some surahs together.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So there are several elements that we can bring within the home to bring in the hate to use the word ritual, but the practical or the practice aspects of our deen. But again, what I would like to really focus on is the Muslim part, because that is what matters. That is what will carry our kids through in the end. That's the basic foundation they need to be successful, not just at home, but also at school and also in the workplace as well. In their relationships, as inshallah, one day when they become a husband or wife or a father and a mother, that Muslim character is what's going to help them do the best they can to have ihsan in everything that they do in life.
100%. And I think, to me, I'm a huge fan of Muhammad Ali, the greatest of all time boxer, right? And there's so many clips of him out there. You just, speaking off the cuff, speaking freely, speaking to the press, to the media, to the reporters of his time. And one of his all-time best quotes is, he would judge somebody's character when he was sitting around a dining table about how that person interacted with the waiter, right? So if that person interacted with the waiter like they were just, I'm just going out on a limb here, and like trash, scum of the earth, or you're just a waiter, or if that person treated the waiter, the wait staff, the host, hostess as, what, hey, you're my bro, you're my sis, hey, what's up, how's it going, hey, generous tipper, all that kind of stuff, like just down to earth, humble, and just being a nice person overall, right?
Yep.
Then Muhammad Ali would always say, what, that's my kind of person. What? And it's so true. You can't be a monster in the home, right, and then all of a sudden you're a dual personality and you're just the nicest person out on the face of the earth. Yeah. Because it all starts from the home, doesn't it? Absolutely. You have to be that role model. And I think it's just, maybe this is a harsh commentary, and I'm going to look at the camera and just say it out there. You can't offload. You can't offload. You might be sending your child to school. You might be sending your child to piano lessons, to, code camp, to the mosque. But again, how as a parent, and I'm going to paraphrase and borrow from Sister Kashmala from a previous episode, how are you connecting before you correct, right? How are you connecting as a parent before you go in and just start correcting, right? So, Brother Omar, this has been an amazing episode. I think this has just been very, very, very helpful for a whole bunch of parents. And the whole purpose of us doing this weekly live show is just to kind of get into some of the hard discussions that normally people either don't want to have, don't like to have, or don't have, period. So thank you so very much
for this. Thank you for having
me. Any last words? Quick 30 seconds.
Parenting is a verb. Parenting is a verb. It's an action. It's something we have to do all the time. It's not an on-off switch. We're parents from the time our kids are born till we leave this earth, right? We're always going to be parenting our kids. So if there was one aspect of parenting I would like to as a takeaway, is communication. Keep the lines of communication open as much as possible. Don't expect the kids to come to you. Go to the kids, right? Go to the kids. Be that coach. Be there for the students, but for your kids and our students. But really communicate and encourage conversation by offering conversation and keeping those conversations going and creating a household where kids feel free to communicate and to speak about whatever topic it is. Because if they're not speaking to us as parents, they're speaking to somebody else.
Yeah.
And who is that somebody else?
Right.
And what are that person's values?
Well said. Well said. Okay, and on that note, we'll cut the cameras and tune in. Tune in often. This show is done every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. And again, we cover a range of topics: parenting, marriage, teens, within an Islamic Muslim faith-based focus. So tune in.